Check the mic and make sure it sound right, boys.
What's up? What's down? What is going on around? I'm Paolo Leasing, founder of StartupInTaiwan.com. This show is to answer your questions about starting up in Taiwan, either for business, school, or just hanging around. So leave your questions in the comments section below. Our topic for today is a little bit edgy. Why Taiwan is not a competitive place for startups or foreign startups. And our guest for today is Jachim Gobien from Belgium. Jachim is a freelance management consultant with extensive background in banking industry. He has worked for BNP Paribas for almost a decade. All right, welcome to the show, Jachim. Did I pronounce it correctly, or?
It's close enough. My name is very complicated, causes difficulties everywhere across the world. The proper pronunciation is Jachim.
Jachim, welcome to the show then.
Thank you.
All right, first question. Why Taiwan?
I came to Taiwan a little bit by coincidence, and it was a very nice discovery. Basically, I left my corporate job in the Middle East. I started studying Chinese language in China itself because one of my ambitions for ever since I was a teenager was actually to come to the Far East and to live and work over here. Unfortunately, I liked the experience in the initial stages, and when you don't have that initial experience, then it becomes difficult at first to be able to move abroad. So after roughly spending 2.5 years in Belgium in the corporate world, so originally I'm from Belgium, I found a position in the Middle East, and I moved there. The Middle East for me was always like an interim period, like it's already halfway between Europe and the Far East.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm happy that that occurred in the sense that it changed my views about the Middle East a lot. But at the same time, I always felt that the Middle East is kind of an artificial environment, a very desert environment with lots and lots of modern buildings.
Mm-hmm.
But in terms of amount of culture and what you eventually have in terms of outdoor activities and natural beauty, this is kind of very limited. So in terms of my personality and the environment in which I was in, that was not the best fit.
Okay.
So to come back to your initial question, when I was in China, I started studying Mandarin language for a couple of months, and it's cold. I came from the Middle East. I'm not used to the cold winter weather in Beijing. And I said, well, you know what, my first 3-4 months, I wasn't really able to explore much. So let me start to go a little bit more to the south. I went to Hong Kong, Guangzhou, Shenzhen, Macau. And that's when the rumors about the virus in Wuhan started. Things changed almost overnight, in Guangzhou and Shenzhen. For example, Chinese New Year was cancelled. I was looking very, very much forward to my first time experiencing Chinese New Year, and it got cancelled. So I didn't really know what was happening, and I was like, okay, I can go back to Beijing. My flight is normally in about 3-4 weeks from now. But I don't know what I will find over there. So at that time, I decided to visit my friend who lives in the Philippines.
Okay.
And I went from Hong Kong to the Philippines. I lived there for about 3 months.
Oh, cool.
And then also there, the rumors started about closing the airport, and I didn't really want to get stuck in the Philippines for one particular reason, which was the fact that a lot of people from the Philippines also didn't really trust the healthcare system. And I heard stories, for example, that the initial COVID cases that got diagnosed, that they didn't want to be hospitalized in a specific hospital, so they fled from police chasing them throughout the entire city just to get hospitalized in one specific hospital, which was the
Okay.
hospital in Bonifacio Global City,
Okay.
next to where I was living.
Okay.
I was like, well, I don't know, like whether I'm very comfortable with this. I don't want to return back to Europe because I left my job in order to come to Asia. So
Correct.
I want to stay in Asia. And Taiwan became the obvious choice because, well, it's next to the Philippines, and second of all, it's Chinese speaking. The other options were not really an option in the sense Hong Kong and Singapore are super expensive in terms of cost of living. So I said, you know what? Yes, let me come to Taiwan. Initially, with the expectation to be here for about 90 days, and even before to be able to continue my Chinese language courses. But needless to tell, that didn't happen because it became the biggest health care crisis that we faced in a long time.
Correct. So before all these decisions, I'm sure you've heard of Taiwan, right? What was your first impression when you came to Taiwan? Or did you know about Taiwan even before you actually came to Asia?
Well, obviously I heard about Taiwan, and I've seen Taipei 101 on pictures. I knew that Taiwan was very important in terms of the semiconductor industry because I'm someone that has been following the financial markets for the past 10 years. So I knew a little bit about it, but my knowledge was very limited in the sense that most of the time you hear about the big Asian economies like China, Japan, and to the lesser extent, I would say Korea and India. But aside from that, actually the amount of information that you hear in other parts of the world, I would say it's relatively limited.
Okay, so before we jump into the main topic that I wanted to go to, basically, how do you find Taiwan? What makes Taiwan an attractive place for foreigners in general?
The biggest discovery for me was when I arrived in Taiwan was the fact that I think it's one of the best places in terms of outdoor environment. It's something that is vastly underestimated, but in total I traveled to about 40 countries, and I think Taiwan ranks among the top two. The other one is Japan, which is very highly ranked for me. And I feel the two, in terms of culture and in terms of natural beauty, they have a lot to offer on the same level. So from that perspective, it's been a really a very nice experience. I recommend all my friends and family members to eventually to come to Taiwan and to actually discover it. In terms of hospitality sector, I know that there are some issues that the cost of the hospitality is relatively high compared to some other places, but I do think that you can have a very adventurous and also relaxing, luxurious hospitality experience on the islands. There is so much to do, and there is something to do basically for anyone. It doesn't matter what type of person they are. There is a lot of outdoor activities that you can do in terms of beach sports and in terms of hiking activities. Aside from that, there is all these wellness spas, etc. So I guess any person can really find something over here that they really like.
Okay. Okay. So I'm now leading into our main topic about Taiwan being not so competitive in terms of a place to attract foreign startups. But before that, could you give us a little bit of, well, you've already talked about your extensive background in banking, working for Belgium and the Middle East. So could you tell us a little bit more about your background, how you came about traveling to different places as well, and how you get to know each location's competitiveness in terms of attracting startups?
So basically, I have a very generalistic background in the sense that I studied law initially, and then I studied economics in addition. With that background, I went in the banking sector initially for I was working for a subsidiary of BNP Paribas, one of the biggest European financial institutions. Over there, like I got quite a good exposure to different business profiles and also to the European economic environments. However, when I moved to the Middle East, I got to see different aspects of the small GCC countries. The GCC countries, essentially, they are city-states, very comparable to what Singapore is, but they all have also their unique atmosphere around them. So I've spent roughly 8 years in the Middle East, and then I started to come to Asia. That's when eventually I made the decision to leave that position and to move myself to the Far East. So I've seen a lot. I got exposure to many different types of companies, to many different countries. I've been an extensive traveler, as I already indicated, and that's how I'm able to compare to some extent what are good aspects about a certain geography, and what are the areas on which they can vastly improve, in my opinion. So that's where I draw basically my knowledge from.
Got it. I think you will be the first person I'm going to be interviewed who works for and worked for the banking sector to tell us more about every one of our guests' main concern, which is Taiwan's banking system as one of the reasons why it's not as competitive. Could you tell us more about why, how Taiwan's banking system may not be that good?
I think every person has different experiences, and to some extent it is based on the experiences that we face as an individual. For me, what was the most shocking, I would say, is that I come from a banking background myself, and I do understand the processes that are behind it, but then I don't really understand why the execution is that. So it goes back a lot to my initial experience that I basically, when I entered Taiwan, I was on a touristic visa still. I came here on probably the last flight from the Philippines that was still accepted. And then initially I'm just using my foreign bank cards until the moment that I made that decision that COVID situation is not going to get resolved anytime soon. Let me apply for a gold card based on my occupation. Then what happened next was the queues for this gold card program, which I think has a lot of very attractive features for foreigners. I think in terms of promotion, probably on that aspect, they could still do a better job to the outside world to further promote it, because I'm not sure about the latest statistics, but I think we are somewhere between 1,500 and maybe 2,500 gold cards holders.
I think we're more than 3,000. Sorry to cut you. Yeah, okay. Around 3,000 have been issued. But the question is, how many of those gold card holders are still in Taiwan? Because I know some of them still have their gold cards, but they're no longer in Taiwan. They're probably waiting for, I don't know, maybe for COVID to get out and then come back here to continue with that.
So yeah, to continue on our initial topic, I think in terms of concern, like how many of those gold card holders essentially stayed in Taiwan. It is a question. It's also like something that I have seen at some point in time, that there was a big influx of gold card holders to Taiwan, and then subsequently a lot of them left again when the situations in their own countries improved. In my case, I came here like way before, when initially like COVID was still like a very unknown thing, like nobody really knew about the extent at that point in time. So even when I initially arrived at the airport, they changed the quarantine rules overnight, and I got into the situation where basically the hotel with whom I had a booking for a couple of days, I told them, well, they just informed me that I need to stay longer in like a quarantine environment. It's something new, it's something I could not predict. Can you extend my stay? And the hotel said, well, we can't, we basically, you need to deal with government approved hotels at that moment. But then the government was saying, well, we don't have a list of hotels yet, everything was really new. So
Yes.
the people at the airport were extremely friendly, and were overwhelmed at that point in time to deal with that situation. So I've spent about 6 hours at the airport. Initially they told me well, maybe you should book a flight to somewhere else. That was like my first exposure to Taiwan. Anyway, afterwards, the people from CDC especially, they were super helpful, and somewhere at 2 a.m. at night, they found a hotel that was willing to accept me and an American guy, and that's how I was able to stay here.
Okay.
But then later on, when we come back to the banking, so initially I was on that wrong visa. I made that decision to apply for the gold card visa. The queues were starting to get really long in terms of processing, and at some point they told me that my gold card was approved, but that the issuance, the physical issuance of the card would require some time. And at that point, my only foreign bank cards basically stopped working because of the fact that there is a limit on how much money you can actually withdraw from a foreign in a foreign country. And one of the reasons of that process being there has to do with the fact that people in the banking sector, they are scared about everything that is related to anti-money laundering.
Correct.
And I do understand that concern, but also my main me having access to my own savings stopped at that moment. And I read that you can get a specific number from the government, and with that number you're able to open a bank card. So initially I didn't want to really do that because my gold card was already very close to actual issuance, and then all my problems would be resolved. But then I didn't really see another option, so I did go to request that document, and I went to a bank that was maintaining my savings in the Middle East. So they already know me as a client. They knew from how my money was eventually accumulated, and they also knew what the purpose of that cash withdrawals would be. But when you always have to withdraw money from the ATM to pay eventually for your rental fees, and also for your day-to-day expenses in terms of food, etc. You are withdrawing quite a bit of money just to be able to be able to afford those basic things at the end of the day. The reaction that I got at that moment from the bank was, well, come back in 30 days. And I was like, what do you mean in 30 days? Like, I have like an urgent issue. I never asked for this, but this is the situation that I am facing. And also the government has been very helpful and tries to accommodate for all of this. You as a banking institution are not really being helpful. Also in the media, I can read that well, in these unprecedented times, we will do everything as much as possible to help our clients and businesses to deal with these difficult situations. But that was not my personal experience. In addition, although it was an international bank, there was no English speaking staff. They were not able to get anyone to whom I could speak to. Aside from that, I escalated it. I made a complaint, and even on the complaint, it was actually not properly handled. So I decided to give up on that. I went to another two financial institutions. One of them, they eventually opened a bank account, but the process was a little bit outdated, was a little bit complex for a foreigner because everything was in Chinese, and basically you're not able to really do banking independently without the help of one of your friends. So I wasn't entirely comfortable with that. And then at some point when I actually received the physical gold card, I did open my bank account with one of the local banks that has a semi-translated platform in English. It does all the basics quite well, and I do think it's quite a performant platform. But then at the same time, I do see that there is room for improvement over there.
Okay, so actually you mentioned about the Chinese language or language in general here in Taiwan. That actually leads me to the next point that you want to highlight, which is the language barrier in terms of, if you're a foreigner coming to Taiwan, you could really struggle in terms of processing your papers when you start your company here in Taiwan. Could you elaborate more?
For me, what I feel is important, if you want to have a strong and user-friendly ecosystem that is catered also to bring foreign businesses to Taiwan, you need to be able to also help those foreign companies to make their life easy and be able to relocate over here. And one of the big struggles that I see in terms of individuals, but I know because I have some clients here in Taiwan that eventually I provide financial consulting services to. What I see is that in many cases there is important documents that are not fully understood by someone that is not native Chinese speaking, just because either the translation is entirely not there, or it is only translated half. And I feel that is one of the most difficult and complex aspects for a foreigner to integrate in the Taiwanese society, especially if you're relocating here without the support of a multinational company that basically took care of all the administrative burden, that helped you open a bank account, that helped you to find a lease apartment, etc. So even sometimes I receive documentation in my postbooks coming from the government, who knows I'm a foreigner, and who knows that eventually the type of visa, etc. that I have, but everything is in Chinese. So for me, the only way to deal with that situation is either to take a picture and try to translate it through one of the translation apps, or to eventually ask my friend what is this about? Can you tell me what I need to do?
Which is quite embarrassing sometimes, especially if it's a little bit personal document that you need someone to actually read it for you.
Yeah, like basically sometimes you feel back as if you are illiterate, and that has to do with not mastering the language sufficiently. Is it important to know the language at some point in time? Definitely, but
sure.
Everyone knows also learning Chinese takes a bit of time, and it doesn't happen overnight. So from that perspective, if you really want to have a user-friendly, appealing system for foreign businesses, I would expect that at least there are some improvements on that aspect in terms of dealing with the language barrier. And one of the things could be, for example, in my country, what they do with expat immigrants these days is they get assigned to basically a mentor, and that mentor will eventually meet them on a frequent basis in order to really help them with the integration and with the struggles etc. that they are facing. But because those people that do this, they volunteered and they want to get that exposure to foreign expats at the end of the day, that seems to be working quite well. It's an experiment. It has to do with the fact that my country historically has been facing a lot of problems with integration, because it is a very complex country where you have 3 official languages, one of them being Dutch, the other 2 French and a little bit of German, because of its size being roughly the same as Taiwan. Also English extremely important, and not everyone knows all these languages, and then the problem of integration is really there, and how do you deal with that?
Okay.
So I think that is a very good initiative, and I think Taiwan would benefit from considering something like that as well.
Okay. So the third point that you want to raise is the whole startup ecosystem in general, not kind of like supporting a startup, a foreign startup. Could you briefly, or could you describe how the Taiwan startup ecosystem looks like from your perspective?
So from my perspective, I think the overall climate in Taiwan is really nice, and there is a lot of benefits here in terms of creating that right balance, I would say, between having a very relaxing environment and at the same time also having the ability to set up your company over here and have access to a labor force that is relatively well educated and also that knows how to work. But we already touched on the language barrier that does exist, and there are also complexities in terms of processes. For example, one of the things that I found quite shocking when I started to explore is it's very difficult to find accountants that are actually working based on some of the mainstream accounting software programs. Other examples are, for example, that in terms of being able to get overseas employees to Taiwan is quite complex. So when I compare that, aside from the Gold Card program, because the Gold Card program does offer a lot of flexibility. Basically, it allows you to almost go into every direction. But that being said, this is not accessible to everyone, and also the rules of the Gold Card program, they became more stringent at some point in time because there was a little bit of abuse during the COVID period when like in many parts of the world, people were already like facing for months and months quarantines and work at home, and Taiwan was at that moment was a very attractive option. So the point that I want to make is that when I see, for example, what Dubai has done, like basically like the United Arab Emirates in general, they were facing a very different issue. The issue was that basically during the middle of the pandemic, a lot of people lost their jobs over there, and the visas are linked to basically like the employment. So they were forced to leave the country, and that also. The consequence of that was that the occupancy rates of the buildings, etc., started to decrease very fast. So at some point in time, the United Arab Emirates started to reform its visa programs in order to be able to cater towards digital nomads, to cater towards people serious entrepreneurs to bring their businesses to the United Emirates, because there would be like a clear path on how to eventually get a permanent residence permit, etc. And in my opinion, what Taiwan misses a little bit is the fact that Taiwan is not a digital nomad paradise, because the cost of living is relatively high compared to some other options that exist. We're thinking about mainly about Thailand, for example, who has a very good visa program. And aside from that, they are also not really at the same level as some other programs, such as, for example, the Japanese and the Korean startup programs. They seem to be more flexible in terms of bringing a foreign business to their country, and also being able to propose forms of financing. So, for example, I've seen startup programs in Japan, where eventually foreign owners are able to get very low interest rate loans from the government to be able to roll out their business. And I think Taiwan needs to ask itself the question, what do they want to achieve with bringing high-level foreigners to Taiwan, and what do they want to get out of it? Because if it's just for 1 year, 2 years, and then those people, they will leave, it doesn't really do anything for them. Maybe it did bring in the short term, it's brought some employment opportunities, etc. But if it's not sustainable, it doesn't really help in any way. That is also the issue that they face in terms of their own labor force. A lot of the qualified people, they move overseas because the amount of opportunities that they can get overseas, they are much better paid. So how do you stop that bleeding of talent to other geographies? And I emphasize that we are in a world where we are competing for talent, and we are not competing just with the countries that are nearby or the places that are nearby, but we are basically really competing for talent with the entire world, or at least very significant portions of the world, because the issue about having a super-aged society is the same in the United States, it's the same in Canada, it is the same in many parts of Europe, it's the same in Japan, Korea, also I think Singapore, China. And at the end of the day, we are all competing about those people that are able to be financially independent and that are highly qualified. And for them to be attracted to your place, you need to be able to offer them a good package that is sufficiently flexible, and then they might consider they will eventually they will discover the environment, and then they will see to what extent they are able to fit in. And that's why having proper integration processes in place, and making doing business as easy as possible are super important. So to give one concrete example, I think on average these days it takes between 2 to 4 months to open a business as a foreigner in Taiwan. In Singapore, this can be done in 7 days. There is no problem. That is just one example. Okay. The other examples, they are related to, for example, the accounting processes. I've seen some of the accounting processes over here. Despite I have an accounting background, I'm actually a certified management accountant. It's not entirely clear how it works over here, because all the information is in Chinese. So you are very reliant on what is being told by other people. And the question is this what a foreign owner, what they are looking for? I think one of the most essential aspects is that a foreign owner, entrepreneur, understands its own finances. If not, something is quite wrong, in my opinion.
Correct. So you've already kind of touched based on some of the things that a typical foreigner is facing here in Taiwan. But as you know, our show is not just for people who wants to start a business in Taiwan. It's for any foreigner who wants to start a life here, either as a student or starting a business or work here. Just one question based on your experience. How do you think could Taiwan improve the lives of foreigners here in general?
I think in general the quality of life here is quite good, and there is it's one of the most livable places in the world from my experience. That being said, I do believe that language barrier and the fact that sometimes the processes are not fully clear, it does create a significant hurdle, and it does weigh on the quality of life in certain ways. So this is to me the aspect where I would like to see vast improvements.
Okay, second to the last question before we head to last question before we head to a little bit light topic. What's your action item? How could our show help you?
I'm always looking to connect to people that are willing to think out of the box, or that in terms of setting up collaborations. And aside from that, I work as a financial consultant. Like most of my clients, they are a little bit everywhere. So I have several clients in the US and Europe, some clients in Singapore and Australia. So basically I advise startup companies and SMEs that are going through fundraising campaigns, or that need advisory based on their financial models, etc., or creating their budgets. That is what I do day in, day out.
All right, so let's go to the last part, which is basically fast round. I will basically just ask you a series of questions. Just tell me what comes to your mind. Are you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
All right. What's your daily breakfast?
I like to eat yogurt with fruit.
Are you a morning or night person?
I'm definitely a night person.
What show are you currently watching on Netflix?
I canceled my Netflix subscription because I kind of went through all the shows that interested me, and nothing new was showing up. So
got it. Are you Android or iOS user?
I'm an Android user.
Mac or PC?
PC.
Favorite games or board games?
There's two games that I love to play. One is Risk, which is a very intense board game that takes a little bit of luck to win. And the other one I like especially because it's a collaborative game, and it's not a game about competing against each other, which is called Pandemic. A little
Wow.
bit. Maybe not the most fortunate name in the current climate, but I do think it's one of the best board games out there.
Okay. Favorite movie of all time?
The Rock.
Favorite Taiwanese food?
I like Xiao Long Bao.
Xiaolongbao. And what's your not so favorite Chinese food or Taiwanese food?
I don't like the smell of chow tofu, the stinky tofu. It's not appealing to me.
Our last guest actually said that this is actually his favorite Taiwanese food, and I would agree to him with him actually on this.
Well, people have
I
different
love the fried.
tastes.
I love fried chow tofu. Well, that's the last question for the day. I'm really happy that you're able to come to our show face to face. So thank you so much for your time, Jachim.
Thank you for inviting me.
Check the mic and make sure it sound right, boys.